I'm sorry. I never looked for you. I never even tried. David's voice cracked as he knelt by the gravestone. His fingers trembled against the cold stone, his eyes wet with years of unshed tears. I should have done more. I should have found you. The camera held on his broken face, the wind picking up around him, the sound of his regret cutting through the silence like a blade. But what he didn't know, standing there in the graveyard at sunrise, was that his daughter was watching him from the trees. Before we dive deeper into this story, I need to ask you something. Have you ever regretted not fighting harder for someone you loved? Drop a comment below if you've ever experienced that kind of pain. And if you believe second chances are worth fighting for, hit that subscribe button. I promise you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. David stood alone at the graveyard, a wealthy man with nothing left but guilt. The sun was barely up, casting a pale light across the headstones as if the world itself had no energy to move. His gray suit hung heavy on him, the same suit he'd worn to countless meetings. But today it felt like a weight he couldn't shake. Today it wasn't just about business. It wasn't about his empire or his status. Today it was about his daughter, the one he had failed, the one he had lost, and the one he could never bring back. He had been here every year since that fateful day. Every year, he stood by the grave of his only child, Emily, and apologized. He apologized for not being there, for not listening when she needed him most, for never having the courage to admit that, beneath all his success, he had always been terrified of failure, terrified of failing her. The wind picked up, a chill cutting through the early morning air as David placed the bouquet of flowers onto the grave. Lilies. He always brought lilies. She'd loved them when she was little. He could still remember how she'd run to him with her little hands full of flowers, her face bright with joy. I'm so sorry, Em. I tried to make it right, but it's too late now. He lowered his head. The tears came faster now, the grief impossible to hold back. In the 5 years since that night, the accident that had taken his daughter's life, he'd done everything he could to bury the pain. He'd buried it in work, in meetings, in endless contracts and boardrooms. He'd thrown himself into building his fortune, but no matter how much money he made, no matter how successful he became, nothing could bring her back. Nothing could erase the hollow feeling in his chest. David had never really been there for her. Not the way a father should be. He'd been too wrapped up in his business, too obsessed with his image, to notice the small signs that something was wrong. By the time he realized it, by the time he realized she needed him, it was too late. The accident happened so suddenly. One moment, Emily had been alive, full of hope and energy. The next, she was gone, leaving only the pain of regret behind. The funeral had been small, just a handful of people. David had been surrounded by people who knew how to look like they cared, how to offer the right words, the right gestures. But none of them really understood. None of them knew the emptiness of losing a child. I never looked for you, David said softly, his voice cracking again. I should have found you. I should have kept looking. The sound of a car driving by in the distance was the only interruption, and for a moment, David felt the weight of the world press down on him, crushing him under the truth. He had failed as a father, but what he didn't know was that Emily was alive. She was out there, not far from him. She had been watching him for months now. She had seen him cry, seen him apologize to a grave that held no answers. And she couldn't help but wonder, did he even really care? Was all this pain for her? Or was it just a way for him to absolve himself, to ease the guilt of a man who had never bothered to search for his daughter? Emily had her own story to tell, one that didn't include her father's grief. After the accident, after everyone thought she was gone, she had been taken to a small town, far from the life she had known. The world she'd left behind was one of wealth, of privilege. But the world she entered was different. It was simpler, harsher, and though it was difficult, it was also the place where she started to rebuild herself. She didn't need her father's apology. What she needed, what she had always needed, was the love that had been missing from her life, the attention, the reassurance, the belief that she was worth fighting for. David wiped his face, standing up slowly as he gazed at the grave one last time. "I'm so sorry, Emily. If I could have done more, if I could change things, I would give up everything, just to hold you again." Unbeknownst to him, Emily stood only a few yards away, hidden in the trees, watching every word, every gesture. The man who had once been her father, who had lost her without even realizing it, was now a man broken by his own regret. Emily's heart ached. It was hard to tell if the sorrow she felt was because of him, or because of herself. The years of feeling abandoned, of fighting to survive without him, had left their scars. But now she had a choice. She could walk away like she had so many times before, or she could face the truth. What if it's not too late? The air was thick with silence as David slowly turned and walked away from his daughter's grave. His heart was heavy, weighed down by a mixture of guilt and hopelessness. Every step he took felt like he was walking further away from any chance of redemption. He had no idea that today would be the day his world would shift. The path leading out of the cemetery was quiet, lined with tall trees that barely whispered in the wind. David wiped his face once more, trying to regain some composure. He could hear the faint sound of his footsteps, but it was the thought of Emily that drowned everything else out. Maybe she's really gone. Maybe it's too late. The words slipped from his lips like they didn't belong to him. Just then, a soft voice broke through the stillness, startling him. "You can't change the past, but maybe you can change the future." David froze. He turned slowly, his heart beating faster as he looked toward the voice. A woman stood at the edge of the cemetery, leaning against a tree. She was dressed simply, with messy hair and a look of quiet intensity on her face. Her eyes locked with his, and there was something about her presence that made David pause. She seemed familiar. David took a step forward. "Who are you?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She glanced down at the ground for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts, before finally meeting his gaze again. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "But maybe you should stop blaming yourself. There's a bigger picture here, one you might be missing." David blinked. He didn't understand. The pain inside him felt too real, too deep for anyone to just walk in and try to smooth over. "I don't need some stranger telling me how to grieve," he muttered, his voice edged with frustration. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes searching his face. "I'm not telling you how to grieve, but I do know something you don't." David's curiosity was piqued. "And what's that?" The woman paused, her lips pressed together as if debating whether or not she should continue. "Your daughter is alive." David's heart skipped a beat. What did you say?" The woman didn't break eye contact. "She's alive, David. Emily is alive. She didn't die that night. She's been out there all this time, living and watching you." David's world seemed to tilt. He stumbled back a step, his breath catching in his chest. "No, that's impossible. She died in the car accident. I saw the reports. The funeral." "Trust me," the woman said, stepping closer now. "I know it's hard to believe, but she's not gone. She's been living in a small town not far from here. She's been trying to stay away, trying to keep the past behind her. But she's been watching you, wondering why you never came for her." David felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. His knees almost buckled beneath him. Why didn't she come to me?" The woman sighed, her eyes softening with pity. "Because she was angry. She was hurt. She thought you'd abandoned her." David felt his heart crack at the words. I didn't abandon her. I searched for her. I tried to. I couldn't find her. I tried everything to." "Maybe you tried to search, but you never really looked," the woman interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. "You were too caught up in your own grief, your own guilt, and you never gave her the chance to believe you really cared." David's chest tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. He had always believed that if he just had the right tools, the right people, he could have found her. He thought that if he just buried his grief in work, maybe the pain would go away. But now, hearing this woman's words, it all felt like a lie he had told himself. "Where is she?" David finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where is my daughter now?" The woman hesitated before answering. "She's here. In this town. She's close." David felt a rush of emotions. Confusion, anger, disbelief. His mind was racing, trying to process what he was hearing. Emily, his little girl, the one he had thought was lost forever, was alive. She had been alive all this time, watching him grieve, and he had no idea. The realization hit him like a punch to the stomach. "How do you know this?" David asked, his voice shaking. The woman's gaze softened, and she looked away for a moment before answering. "Because I'm Emily's mother." David's head spun as the weight of her words sunk in. His heart pounded in his chest, the world suddenly too heavy to bear. Emily's mother. How was this possible? The woman standing before him was not who he expected. She wasn't a stranger. She wasn't someone who could just come in and tell him this story, this truth, without understanding the depth of the pain. "Emily's alive," David whispered again, as if saying it aloud would make it real. The woman nodded slowly. "She is. But she's not ready to see you. Not yet." David's throat tightened as he tried to hold back the flood of emotions. "How do I fix this? How do I get her back?" The woman stepped back, her voice calm yet filled with something he couldn't place. "You start by facing your own truth, David. You start by admitting that you were wrong. Then, and only then, can you hope to make things right." David stood in stunned silence, his mind spinning. Everything he had believed about his daughter's death, about his guilt, it all felt like it was shattering in front of him. There was no way to undo the past, but there was a chance to fix the future. And the first step was to find Emily. But where could he begin? David stood frozen for a long time, staring at the woman who had just turned his world upside down. Her words still echoed in his head like a distant, unfamiliar sound. "Emily's alive. She's been watching you." But how could that be? How could he have missed something so crucial? David's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. But the pieces didn't fit. Everything felt surreal. Emily, his daughter, the one he had buried in his heart, the one he had mourned for 5 long years, wasn't gone. She was out there, somewhere, living her life. But why hadn't she come to him? Why hadn't she reached out? David's fists clenched at his sides, the frustration starting to build. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she come to me when she was alive? The woman, Emily's mother, sighed deeply, her eyes full of quiet understanding. She couldn't, David. She was hurt. She felt abandoned. You weren't there when she needed you the most. David's chest tightened. I wasn't there. That thought hit him like a punch to the gut. The truth was undeniable, and it hurt more than anything. He had always been a man of action, quick to make decisions, quick to solve problems, but when it came to Emily, he had failed to act when it mattered most. He had buried himself in his work, in his wealth, and thought that would be enough. But it wasn't, and it had cost him everything. I thought I was doing everything I could. His voice trailed off. I tried so hard to fix things, but I couldn't. The woman shook her head, her voice firm yet gentle. You didn't try in the right way, David. You were so focused on fixing everything around you that you didn't see what was right in front of you, what Emily needed from you. She needed your time, your attention, your love. She didn't need the world. She needed you. David's throat tightened, and he fought back tears. How could he have been so blind? His mind went back to all the missed moments, the birthdays, the school plays, the times she needed someone to listen. Instead, he had been focused on building his empire, chasing success that meant nothing without his family by his side. I failed her, David whispered, more to himself than anyone else. The woman's eyes softened. You did. But that doesn't mean it's too late. It just means you have a lot to make up for. If you want her back in your life, you have to be willing to fight for it. You have to be willing to change. David's heart pounded in his chest. Could it be that simple? Could he really rebuild what had been broken? He had always been a man who fixed problems with money, with power, but could love be fixed with that same formula? Could he fix the damage he'd caused with just an apology and a few kind gestures? Where do I even start? He asked, his voice rough. Start by being real with yourself, she said. Stop pretending it's too late. Stop pretending you can't change. You have to face what you've done before you can even begin to heal. David stood there, the weight of her words sinking in. He had spent so much time running away from his mistakes, from the pain, that he hadn't taken the time to face them. It wasn't just about apologizing anymore. It was about understanding the truth, about understanding how deep his failures ran. He had to let go of his pride. He had to stop pretending that his wealth, his success, could fix everything. He couldn't fix this with money. He had to fix it with himself. "I'll find her," David said finally. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. "I'll find Emily. I'll do whatever it takes." The woman smiled softly, though there was a sadness behind her eyes. "Good, but be prepared. It's not going to be easy. Emily's hurt, David. She won't just let you back in because you ask her to. You'll have to show her, day by day, that you're not the man you were." David nodded, determination rising in him like a fire. "I will. I promise." He turned to leave, his steps feeling heavier than before. The cemetery seemed to stretch on forever, the weight of the past pressing down on him. He had been a man of action, but this was different. This wasn't a business deal. This wasn't a problem to solve with a signature or a negotiation. This was his daughter, and he had to prove that he could be the father she had always needed. The woman watched him as he walked away, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Good luck, David," she whispered to the wind. David didn't hear her. He was already too far gone, already lost in the storm of his thoughts. He didn't know where Emily was. He didn't know what had happened in the years since he had last seen her. All he knew was that he couldn't stop now. He had to find her. He had to show her that he was a father who could be trusted. He was no longer the man who had buried himself in his own success. He was a man on a mission to find his daughter, to earn her forgiveness, to show her that it was never too late. David's search for Emily had taken him to places he never imagined. Small towns, neighborhoods he couldn't pronounce, dead ends. He had hired private investigators, tracked down old friends, and visited every address she might have used. But nothing. There was no trace of her. Felt like she was a ghost. He had never been this lost before. He had always been the man with the answers, the one who could solve any problem. But this was different. This was his daughter, and the usual tactics weren't working. It was late one afternoon when he found himself at a rundown diner on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered above the door, and the smell of grease and coffee hung in the air. It wasn't the kind of place he normally frequented. He preferred the glitz and glam of city life, the kind of places that reflected the success he had worked so hard for. But something about this place felt right. Maybe because it was real. He walked in, his boots scraping the floor as he pushed through the door. The bell above it jingled, and the waitress behind the counter looked up. She was young, with dark curly hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Seat yourself," she said, her voice flat, though there was something oddly familiar in her tone. David slid into a booth near the window, glancing at the menu. It didn't matter what he ordered. He wasn't hungry. He was just tired. He glanced around the diner. A few patrons were scattered around, most of them older men nursing coffee, some eating half-finished meals. He felt out of place, like a stranger in a world he didn't understand. But then something caught his eye. The photo on the wall behind the counter. It was old, yellowed with time, but there was no mistaking the woman in the picture. It was her, Emily's mother. The waitress walked over, her steps slow, like she'd done it 1,000 times. She set a coffee cup in front of him, not saying anything. David stared at the picture on the wall, then back at her. He hesitated. "Are you Emily's mom?" The waitress blinked, her eyes briefly flicking to the photo on the wall, then back to him. Her expression was unreadable. "Yeah," she said quietly, her hands brushing against the edge of the counter as she wiped it down. "That's me." David's breath caught. His heart seemed to stutter in his chest. It wasn't a coincidence. Couldn't be. "You're Emily's mom?" he asked again, the weight of the question hitting him all at once. She gave a small, tight-lipped nod, but her gaze stayed firmly fixed on the counter, not meeting his eyes. How is she? David's voice was soft, uncertain. He didn't know how to ask the question, how to bridge the gap between the years of silence. He hadn't prepared for this. The waitress let out a long breath, like the weight of the question had crushed her just a little. She's fine. David leaned forward. Can you tell me where she is? I've been looking for her. Why? She cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp. Why do you want to find her now? David's chest tightened, and for a second, he almost couldn't answer. He wasn't sure himself, but he knew one thing: he had to make it right. He had to find her. He paused, collecting his thoughts. I need to see her. I need to apologize. I need to make up for everything I've done wrong. The waitress's eyes softened, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, she spoke, her tone quieter this time. Emily's not ready for that, David. You can't just show up and expect her to forgive you. It doesn't work that way. David felt a lump rise in his throat. I know it's not that simple, but I've been looking for so long, and I need to make it right. I don't care how long it takes. The waitress stared at him for a moment and then, finally, she nodded. She's nearby. She works at the cafe down the road. I can give you the address, but don't expect a warm welcome. David didn't care. This was it. This was his chance. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a few bills, sliding them across the counter. Thank you, he said, his voice full of gratitude. But as he turned to leave, the waitress called after him. David. He stopped, looking over his shoulder. You're not the man you were before, she said. But be careful. Emily doesn't trust easily, and she's not going to give you another chance if you mess this up. David nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't going to mess this up. He couldn't. As he stepped out of the diner and into the fading afternoon light, the cool breeze hit his face, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just searching for Emily anymore. He was searching for redemption, and this was his only chance. David's hands were shaking as he stood outside the small cafe, the one the waitress had directed him to. He had spent so much time imagining this moment, dreaming of the apology, the reunion, but now that he was here, in front of the cafe that held so many answers, he wasn't sure what to do. What if she didn't want to see him? What if he was too late? The thought of walking away crossed his mind, but he couldn't. He had come too far. Taking a deep breath, David pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, but the noise felt muffled, distant. Everything felt unreal, like he was walking through a dream. The cafe was small, cozy. There was a warmth to it, the kind of place where you could sit and lose track of time. A few people sat at tables, sipping their coffee, chatting quietly. But it was the woman behind the counter who caught his attention. Emily. She looked just like the girl he remembered, though now she was a woman. Her face was more mature, her eyes a little guarded. The moment their gazes locked, 1,000 thoughts raced through David's mind. She's here. She's real. She's been alive this whole time, and I missed it. He took a step forward, but his legs felt like lead. He hadn't expected the wave of emotion to hit him this hard. It wasn't just the guilt. It was the realization of how much time had passed, how much he had lost. Emily didn't move at first, just continued cleaning the counter. But when he took another step toward her, she finally looked up. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were cold. David's throat went dry. Emily, I know who you are, she interrupted, her voice steady but distant. David flinched, the words cutting deeper than he had expected. I didn't mean to. Save it, Emily said, shaking her head as she turned to grab a rag. I don't need your apologies. The air between them was thick with tension. David's heart pounded, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure what to say. Where do I even start? He forced himself to speak, his voice quieter now. I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you, but I was wrong. I failed you, Emily. Her hand paused on the rag, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, slowly, she turned to face him again, her eyes hard and unforgiving. "You failed me? You don't get to say that. You weren't even there. Not when I needed you. Not when I was struggling. You never even looked for me." David's chest tightened. "I've been looking. I've been trying. No," her voice was sharp now, cutting through his words. "You weren't looking for me, David. You were looking for your own peace of mind. You wanted to feel better, not actually make things right. You didn't want to face the truth." David recoiled, her words hitting him like a slap. He knew she was right. He hadn't been there when she needed him. He hadn't even considered that she might have been in pain, that she might have needed him more than anything else. All those years, he had buried himself in work and wealth, thinking that if he provided, that was enough. But it wasn't. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. The words felt empty, meaningless, but it was all he had. Emily's gaze softened just a fraction, but she didn't forgive him. Not yet. "You're sorry? For what, David? For not being there? For thinking money could fix everything? For pretending everything was fine when it wasn't?" She shook her head. "You can't just say sorry and expect everything to be okay. You broke something inside me, something I can't fix just because you say a few words." David's chest tightened, and a wave of regret washed over him. He knew there was no quick fix for this. No amount of money, no grand gesture, no apology would make things right. The damage was done. "I know I can't fix it all," he said quietly. "But I want to. I want to try." For a moment, Emily said nothing, just looked at him. Then, slowly, she sighed and walked around the counter, standing right in front of him. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just about fixing things. It's about trust. It's about proving that you're willing to fight for something that's worth it. You can't just waltz in here and expect me to believe you." David swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't expect you to believe me. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I know it's going to take time. I just want a chance to show you that I can be the man you need. That I can be the father I should have been all along." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without saying another word, she turned and walked back to the counter, picking up her rag again. David stood there, frozen, feeling like a failure in the most profound way. He had come here thinking he could make things right, thinking he could fix it all in one moment. But the truth was, he wasn't sure how to fix something this broken. He had a long road ahead of him, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. Emily didn't look at him again, but the silence between them was heavy with unsaid words, unspoken pain. David wasn't sure what the next step was. All he knew was that he couldn't give up now. Not after everything. David hadn't been able to sleep since his conversation with Emily. Every time he closed his eyes, her words echoed in his mind. "You weren't there. You didn't even look for me." They had cut through him like knives, deeper than anything he had ever felt. He had spent years thinking he was doing the right thing, working hard, providing for his family. But Emily had been right. He hadn't been there when she needed him most. The next morning, David found himself back at the same cafe, hoping for a second chance. But this time, things felt different. The air was thick, heavy with unresolved tension. He knew he couldn't fix everything in a single visit. But if he left now, he might never get another chance. He walked in, his hands clenched by his sides, fighting the urge to turn around and walk out. Emily was behind the counter again, her back to him, wiping down the surface. She didn't look up when he entered, and for a moment he considered leaving. But he couldn't. Not now. Taking a deep breath, David walked toward the counter and leaned against it, just a few feet from where she stood. "Emily," he said softly, his voice low and steady. She didn't respond at first, continuing to wipe the counter as if he wasn't even there. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. "Please," he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. "I know I hurt you. I know I can't change the past, but I need you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to make this right, and I won't stop trying. I won't give up." Emily set the rag down and finally turned to face him, her eyes tired but unwavering. "You're right," she said quietly. "You can't change the past. But I don't need your apologies. I don't need your promises." David's chest tightened. "Then what do you need?" She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing her words carefully. "I need to know you're not just here because you feel guilty. I need to know you're not here because it's convenient for you. You disappeared when I needed you, David. And now, you expect me to believe that you're going to stay." David's heart pounded in his chest. He felt every ounce of the pain in her words. He couldn't deny it. He hadn't been there. He had chosen his career, his success, over his own daughter. He had let her slip through his fingers, and now he was trying to catch up, trying to fix everything in one go. "I know I don't deserve your trust," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "but I'm not asking you to trust me right away. All I'm asking is for a chance to prove that I'm not the man I used to be. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I'm asking for time. Time to show you that I can be the father I should have been." Emily didn't say anything for a moment. Her eyes softened, but only a little. "You think time will fix this? You think time is going to erase everything you've done?" David didn't have an answer. He wasn't sure if time could fix it, but he knew that he wasn't going to stop trying. Not for her. Not for himself. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I have to try, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm not running anymore." Emily's expression shifted, and for a split second, David saw something like vulnerability in her eyes. But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by the same guarded look. "You don't get to come in here and tell me you're not running anymore," she said, her voice cold. "You don't get to act like this is easy for you. It's not. I've had to do everything on my own for years. I didn't have the luxury of having someone to fall back on. You don't get to pretend like this is a simple fix." David's chest tightened at her words, but he knew she was right. It wasn't simple. It wasn't easy. But he wasn't going to let her push him away this time. "I'm not pretending," he said, his voice steady now, more certain. "But I can't just give up. I don't know how to make this right, but I won't stop trying. I won't walk away this time." Emily's eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. The silence stretched, and David could feel the weight of it pressing down on both of them. Then, finally, Emily spoke. "I don't know if I can believe you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm willing to give you a chance. A small one. Don't screw it up." David's heart surged, a rush of hope filling him. But he knew it wasn't the end. It wasn't forgiveness. It was just a chance. And it was more than he had ever expected. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I won't." As he turned to leave, he felt a flicker of something inside him. It wasn't closure, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something better. David sat in his car outside the cafe, his hands resting on the steering wheel. The engine was off, but the car idled in his mind, his thoughts spinning. It had been a week since Emily had given him a chance, and it wasn't enough. Nothing felt like enough. He stared at the cafe. He saw her through the window, Emily, wiping down a table, her movements fluid and practiced. It was clear she was avoiding him. She still hadn't invited him inside. How do I fix this? He wondered. He had spent his entire life avoiding the tough conversations, the hard truths. He built walls instead of bridges. But now everything was different. He wasn't sure what to do, what to say. The week had been full of half meetings and awkward silence, where David would stand on the other side of the counter, trying to make small talk, trying to show he was changing. But it wasn't working. Emily had been polite, too polite, but there was a distance between them, a coldness that ran deeper than he could reach. Every day he came in, tried to talk, tried to do the right thing, but it always felt like he was falling short. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him from his thoughts. He pulled it out, his heart racing when he saw the text. It was from his lawyer. "David, you need to sign the paperwork today. If not, we risk losing the deal. The pressure is mounting. You can't afford to miss this." The words hit him like a punch. The business deal he'd been focused on for months. The one that could finally secure his future. The temptation to just go inside the office, sign the papers, and move on with his life was strong. He could walk away from all this pain, this guilt. But deep down, David knew that wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't what he needed. He could continue chasing success, burying himself in work, but he'd already done that for years. He'd seen where it had led him. Alone, David's eyes drifted back to the cafe window. Emily was still there, the same steady rhythm of her work, of her life. She was moving on, building something real, something he wasn't part of. He exhaled slowly. The choice was clear now. With a deep breath, he grabbed his jacket, opened the door, and stepped out of the car. His legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to move, but he pushed forward, each step taking him closer to her, to the chance he'd been given. As he walked into the cafe, the bell above the door rang softly. Emily looked up, her face unreadable as she wiped her hands on the towel. For a second, neither of them moved. Then, David cleared his throat, trying to steady his nerves. "Hey!" he said quietly, his voice softer than usual. "Do you have a minute?" Emily didn't respond right away. Her gaze flickered over him, but it was hard to read her. Finally, she nodded, motioning to the empty seat across from her. David sat down, feeling the weight of her silence. He stared at the cup of coffee in front of her, then up at her face, trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what you said, about trust, about showing you I'm not just here because of guilt." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "You were right. I thought I could fix everything with money, with success. But I was wrong." Emily didn't say anything. She just waited, her eyes unwavering. "I've spent my life making deals, building things, but I've never built something that mattered more than this," he said, his voice shaking just a little. "I've been running from myself, running from the truth, and I don't know if I can ever fix what I've done to you, to us. But I want to try." Her gaze softened, but she didn't speak. David could feel her eyes on him, steady, searching. It was as if she was trying to decide whether to believe him. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever," he said, the words raw, more real than he had ever been with anyone. "But I can't live the rest of my life pretending like I don't care. I've spent too many years thinking work was the answer, thinking I could do everything alone. But I can't. And I don't want to anymore." David paused. There was a lump in his throat, but he pushed it aside, focused on her. Focused on being real, on finally being the man she needed him to be. "I know it's not going to be easy. I know I can't change the past. But I want to be here. For you. For us. And if you'll give me the chance, I'll spend every day trying to prove that." Emily sat still, her face unreadable, her eyes narrowing slightly. For a long moment, she didn't speak, didn't even move. The silence between them felt like it stretched on forever. Finally, she took a deep breath and set her coffee down. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she said, her words cutting through the air. "But I'm willing to see if you mean what you say. I'm not asking for a miracle, David. Just don't let me down again." David's chest tightened. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Enough for him to hold on to, enough for him to fight for. "I won't let you down," he said, his voice quiet but filled with determination. "I promise." As he sat there, watching Emily process his words, David realized that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. He had taken the first step toward redemption, but it was only a step. The path ahead would be long, filled with obstacles and doubts. But for the first time in years, he felt something inside him stir. A hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel. He wasn't going to give up now. Not on her. Not on them. The morning light filtered through the windows of the cafe, casting soft shadows across the floor. David sat at the corner table, the one he always sat at when he came to visit Emily. It felt familiar now, like a quiet promise to himself. But today it felt different. His heart beat a little faster. He wasn't sure if it was the anticipation of the moment or the hope he carried inside, but it was there, a gentle buzz in his chest. He had done the work. He had shown up. He'd put in the effort even when it felt impossible. And now Emily was finally sitting across from him, not just with him in the same space, but with him in a way that was real. She smiled at him. Her face softened, not as guarded as it had been the first time he'd walked through that door. He had seen the change in her over the past few weeks, small, subtle things. Her laughter, even if it was a little quiet, felt like an invitation. Her touch when she handed him his coffee was warmer. It was clear. She was giving him a chance. "You look good today," he said, his voice low but genuine, his words just the right kind of sincere. She raised an eyebrow, the corner of her lips twitching into a playful grin. "Is that a compliment, Mr. Miller?" she teased, but there was no edge in her tone. David chuckled softly. "I meant it. You always look good. But today, I don't know, there's something about you. You look at peace." She looked at him for a moment, as though weighing his words, then leaned back in her chair and exhaled. "You know, I used to think that was a thing you just had to pretend to do," she said. "But you're right. I do feel more at peace." David's chest tightened. His heart fluttered with hope. He could see the cracks in her walls, the ones she had built to protect herself. They were beginning to break down piece by piece. "That's all I wanted," he said quietly. "For you to find peace. I can't make up for what I did, but I want to be here now, in whatever way you need me to be." For a long moment they just sat there, the silence between them comfortable for the first time. David thought back to the weeks before, to the way everything had seemed so impossible, to the time when Emily's hurt had seemed so deep, so final. But here they were. Finally, Emily reached for her coffee, sipping it slowly, eyes meeting his. "You know, I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again. Not right away, at least." She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to trust you enough to see where this goes." David's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure what to say at first. But what he realized, as he watched her, was that this was all he needed. Just the chance to try to prove that he was different. "I don't need your trust all at once," he said softly. "Just whenever you're ready. I'll be here." Emily smiled then. It wasn't a perfect smile. It wasn't the one she used to hide behind. It was real, honest, and full of hope. "Let's take it one step at a time," she said. "No rush." David nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. This was the start of something. It wasn't a perfect beginning, but it was real. "I'll take it," he said, his voice steady now. "One step at a time." For a long moment they just sat there, the world around them going on like it always had, but the two of them in a small, quiet bubble of their own. For the first time, David felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The next few months passed in a blur of new beginnings. Small changes, subtle, quiet steps forward. David had stopped trying to be the man who could fix everything with money or with quick solutions. Instead, he focused on showing up, every day, every moment. Emily, too, had softened. She wasn't just the woman who had been hurt anymore. She was someone strong, someone who had found her way back to the life she had put on hold. David was no longer chasing success at the cost of everything else. And Emily? She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. They were both becoming the people they were always meant to be. One evening, about a month later, they found themselves sitting on the same bench outside the cafe. It was quiet, peaceful, and, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Emily turned to him with a quiet smile. "I don't know where this is going, David," she said, her voice soft but sure. "But I'm glad I'm finding out with you." David's heart swelled at her words. He took her hand, squeezing it gently, as he looked into her eyes. Eyes that, for the first time in a long time, were full of warmth and trust. "I'm glad too," he whispered. "I'll be here. Wherever this goes, I'll be right here." Emily smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder as they sat in comfortable silence, the world feeling just a little bit more right than it ever had before. The future, whatever it held, didn't seem so impossible anymore. And for the first time in a long time, David didn't feel like he had to chase anything. He'd found what mattered most. He'd found the one thing he'd never expected, Real love. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.